I walked off stage. I was going to my friends. I was talking to them. And then 3 tall security guards, huge beards, by the way, come up. And they're like, you need to come with us. And I'm like, oh,
no.
like, this is weird. When they look at history, they side with and they feel more empathy for the problematic people than the people who were oppressed, which I think is weird. Before, I think it's very weird because it's not everyone against white people. It's everyone against racist people. That's how history should be taught. We needed people who could make these ideas and stories just as digestible. So then when people are making policy arguments or they're doing activism, they have a foundational set of knowledge that will make them question when they hear something racist and also make them support something that they hear is anti-racist. It's good you're bringing this out. Yeah, maybe I lied. I had experiences, especially later on in life, especially being an influencer, where you can meet new people and like the relationship doesn't end out the best. It's just like you know, people can be people.
Yeah. No new friends.
No new friends. No new friends.
I'm Jade Begay, and this is Jaded. On today's show, we have Kahlil Greene, who is known as the Gen Z historian. Khalil is a 2-time Emmy-nominated and Peabody Award-winning digital educator and recently named one of the most important people on the internet by Time magazine. On today's show, we get into combating anti-intellectualism, Black-Indigenous solidarity, and the case for no new friends. Welcome to the show, Khalil. So great to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Early start to the morning, which I personally like.
Nice. Well, I want to just kind of hear about your year, 2025. It's been a chaotic year.
To say the least, yeah.
Yes. Can you talk about some of as a historian, what would you say were some of the most chaotic or iconic moments of 2025?
Yeah, in terms of 2025, I mean, for me, when I think about the highlights and also the negatives, let's just say major moments in general, I mean, one that we can't escape is something that happened very early on, which is Donald Trump coming into office, Trump 2.0. And that's caused a whirlwind of aches and pains and trauma in so many people's lives very early on. He waged a war on all of the types of histories and cultural commentary that we do. He waged a war on trans people, on immigrants. And it's to the point where even his own supporters back in 2024 are saying, we did not know this was going to happen, though they should have, obviously. So that's been devastating for so many people across the world. I think on the flip side of that, I mean, there's been a lot of really cool cultural moments. One that stands out for me is the movie Sinners. That was my highlight. I mean, when I think back on 2025, I'll think about the first time that I watched the movie in theaters, and then the second, third, and fourth time that I watched it in theaters because I saw it a bunch of times. And then it's been an ebb and flow from there. Going back to politics, the death of Charlie Kirk was also a big thing that affected like the work that I do in the political sphere. And then balancing it again with something very positive is the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York City and what that means for the progressive movement and for people from diverse backgrounds being representatives in the highest positions of leadership in both the city and local governments, but also probably in the national stage as well. So it's been a crazy year. There's been ups and downs, but I'm looking forward to 2026.
That was a really good wrap up of the year.
Thank you. I try.
I feel like so much has happened. And also, we not only do we have everything that's playing out on the world stage or national stage, we just have our own lives that, like you said, are sometimes very much impacted by what's going on in those various arenas. You mentioned the work you're doing was impacted by the death of Charlie Kirk. Can you talk about that? How, I'm assuming as a creator, that's what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Charlie Kirk was killed, there was a doubling down on the forms of censorship that we had already seen starting back in, like, let's say 2021, the earliest sort of war on woke. It escalated when Trump came into office. And then when Charlie Kirk was killed, that's when we see this clamping down of free speech in a way that many people didn't expect, especially not from like the Republican Party, who claims that they're always on the side of anti-censorship of
Right.
you can say whatever you want. We love free speech, no safe spaces. And then shortly after, you see someone like J.D. Vance, the vice president, calling for people to report their coworkers or their friends or family members who were talking bad about Charlie Kirk and his legacy. We saw Jimmy Kimmel get taken off air. We saw who else? Like I think there was some Karen from the Washington Post, Karen Attia. She was a journalist. She got fired as well. So it's just a wave of censorship. And I have my own experience at a conference with Forbes where you saw the country turn in a direction where people were weaponizing his legacy to silence any criticism and really just executing on so many things that they had promised to do in terms of like shutting down woke, but in a way that I think surprised even their own base.
That is such a good segue into something I really wanted to talk to you about. And one of the reasons why when I was thinking of guests, you stood out because of this moment that you mentioned at a Forbes conference. I thought well, one, you were invited to speak, and I believe you're a Forbes
30 under 30.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, I'm just curious, what do you think of like these types of lists? Because nowadays we have Forbes under 30 or 30 under 30. We have 40 under 40. We have Time 100. There's Grist 50. There's like so many lists out there. Sometimes I think they're a bit of a detriment to and a distraction for activism work.
Yeah, I think the lists have definitely a lot more or people imbue with it a lot more intrinsic value than it actually holds, right? Like it's not a curation of the best. The reason these lists exist, at least from magazines, is to get more viewers. Everything has a practical function, like economically speaking, so that they know that they created, for example, I got a Time magazine. They did Time 100 for creators. I got that this year. I can only assume one reason that they created it this year is that they know that every single creator who gets that accolade is going to go to their event. They're going to post about it. They're going to bring more awareness so that people are more interested in Time magazines who otherwise would not be whatsoever. And they're going to get more readership. The same thing with all of these. I think Forbes is a little bit different. I think the function of Forbes 30 under 30 is to attract investors and so that Forbes remains the top sort of curator for these VC firms who are looking to invest in companies to then make a lot of money. So they all have an economic motive first and foremost. I think that doesn't negate the fact that people who get the list can also use it functionally. So for me, whenever I get these lists, like, of course, I'm going to do the, oh my gosh, like, thank you. This is so amazing post. And I feel grateful, obviously.
Yeah,
but I think the main thing for me is that it allows me to like open up access to other projects. So it gives me legitimacy when I work with a larger production company, or even sort of butterfly effect. It landed me here, like being on the list and then going to the conference and then giving the speech that I gave. Like I always find that there's a functional usage for them if you make one. But if you get on the list and you're just like, oh, this means that I'm the best content creator, I'm better than everyone else who has ever done whatever I do, then you're mistaken.
Yeah. That's good insight. I think I've gotten a little jaded about these lists because I think, I've been in this work for my entire like adult life and professional career. And sometimes I'm seeing like the same people, the same cohort. It feels a little cliquey. And I'm seeing these leaders who have been dedicated to the work for so long, my mentors, my teachers, not receive the accolade. And I'm like, oh, God, like.
Yeah. And just like it is, like it's meant to be cliquey. It's meant to be the same people because they know if they get, and I can speak as someone who's been on many lists, right? Like when I'm on one, it's easier to find me. So like the whoever's editorial's job it is to curate the top 50. Yeah. So they don't want to take a risk and find someone that's not already in the ecosystem. So they usually go to the same people. When you meet one person who's an editor, let's say there's an event for Time and I meet the editors there, or like some of the writers or freelancers, they know me and then they work at a new magazine. So they get me into that one. So I don't want to say it's a scam, but it's not a scam. So I'll leave
Okay.
I'll leave it
we'll
there.
Leave it there.
Yeah. But like all the things you're saying are completely valid. And I think it's about how you use it more than actually just getting it.
I know as a little right.
Yeah, of course.
Well, back to the event. So you were invited to speak at this Forbes summit or conference, and you gave your talk, which we'll talk more about, because that is, I think, the point of everything. And I don't want to lose that because your talk is, I think, the star of the story. But there was an incident where after you gave your talk, you were removed from the conference. Can you talk about what happened that day? And apparently what was so controversial, or was it just sensation?
Yeah, I can just give the full story
Yes,
then.
please do.
I'll try to be more concise than not. But basically, for the Forbes conference, even if you get the list, you have to buy a ticket. So I was there as an attendee at first. Yeah. So I bought a ticket to the conference thinking that I would meet a lot of people who are interesting or just have fun. I mean, there's like performers there as well. And then shortly before the conference takes place, they reach out to me, someone who was a event organizer, saying that they had slots for people to give like these talks about their work. It was very quick. I think it was 5 minutes, like a 5-minute presentation to just like fill in between two larger panels. And it was unpaid. So it wasn't like I was getting paid to do anything. They were just like, you have this free time, use it to express your creativity, talk about your work. No real guidelines or anything. So I was like mulling over what I wanted to do. And then we went back and forth about the name of the speech and like the topic. And I wanted to talk about anti-intellectualism. Then maybe like a week later, we're like getting close to the event, maybe like a week or two ahead of it. I was actually reached out to a friend who works at runs now March for Our Lives. Her name's Jackie. And she was telling me that I think she had saw that I was on the itinerary. And she said that what they were trying to do and her organization was trying to do is put forward the campaign that they were working over for the past year, which was called 30 Under 30 Gun Violence Edition. So it was a memorial to 30 young people who died under the age of 30 due to gun violence. It was its own magazine. And they were going to distribute it at the event. And they thought that I could use my platform and my speech to bring awareness to it because it kind of fit the idea of like anti-intellectualism and activism with gun violence, which is an issue spurred on by the fact that people don't know much about the data. They don't know much about like the ways and solutions on gun control that can help reduce gun violence incidents. It's really about like, I want my 2A, I want my Second Amendment rights.
And speaking of the list, it's such a, I think I told you this in a DM that it is such a smart culture jam. I haven't seen like a really cool culture jam moment like that in a while. And the way you all, again, speaking about lists and how sometimes they feel really superficial, I felt like that effort was just such a smart way to turn a list of the top whatever on its own head and really highlight, these kids who unfortunately, couldn't live till 30.
Exactly. And I think that's what excited me about it. Like, it was a brilliant idea. Credit goes to Jackie and March for Our Lives. Credit goes to Change the Ref, which is an organization led by Manuel and Patricia Oliver, who were the parents of Joaquin Oliver, who died during the Parkland shooting. And then also there was an agency, Founders Agency, which was like the marketing campaign behind it. So we planned it. It was going to be like they were already distributing the magazines. A big clarification I want to share is that 30 Under 30 is not copyrighted by Forbes. There's many organizations that have it, so there was no copyright issues there. And then, yeah, of course, because people were saying, oh, like you use the copyright. It's like, no, that's not the case. They have huge lawyers. It's a huge nonprofit. So when I went on stage, I gave my speech. I incorporated the ideas about anti-intellectualism, about gun violence. And then I pointed to the fact that there were volunteers who were distributing magazines. At that point, people got up who were already there. Once again, everyone who was involved had tickets. They were at the event. There had been people prior who had passed out things, whether it be business cards or other knickknacks. And yeah, everything went smoothly as far as I knew. I walked off stage. I was going to my friends. I was talking to them, talking to one specifically. And then 3 tall security guards, huge beards, by the way, come up. And they're like, you need to come with us. And I'm like, no. Like, this is weird. So I like made that little eye to my friend, like, I don't know what's going on. Record, do something, run, get help, call my mom. I took me to the back and they were like, we're going to have to confiscate your badge. And I was like, oh, like what happened? They were like, oh, we were given orders to like escort you out. And then after they were like, do you know who else is passing out magazines? And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
no, like, I mean, I knew who, but I'm not gonna like rat them out.
Oh,
So I was
yeah.
like, no, like,
No.
I don't know anything about that. And also, I was not involved in the distribution, so I didn't know who was actually passing them out.
Right.
So then they take me out, and then I'm expecting a message from Forbes. I don't hear anything for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So then I'm like, wow, I was just kicked out of this event. I got no communication. Like I'm practically blacklisted from like the event, or like effectively, I don't have a badge. I can't get in.
Right.
So then I write an article about it, and I put it on social media, and like
At
instantly.
that point, did you just leave the conference then?
I mean, they kicked me
And you
out. So like
just-
they walked
yeah,
me
okay,
out of the
got
venue
it.
and left me there, and my hotel was close by.
And you were
So I
just
went
like,
to
okay.
yeah, I was just like,
okay.
whoa, like what's going on?
Right.
And then I mean, I had questions. I didn't know if it was like about the speech itself. I didn't know if it was like the magazines. I didn't know like what the case was. So then
You were
I
just left in the dark.
left in the dark completely. After I posted about it, I like sent an angry message to, like the people who like helped coordinate my arrival. And
Good.
yeah, very angry message.
Good.
It was effective because they responded very quickly, and they were like, "Oh, let's meet tomorrow."
Okay.
So the next day, I meet with like the I believe the chief communications officer, the chief of live events, and like another person. And what they say is that they had no idea that I was removed from the event whatsoever. They say that their issue was the magazine distribution. They told security to like confiscate the magazines, and they did not tell security to remove me. So I was like, okay, so you told them to remove the magazines, but they went rogue and just decided to remove me with no authority from you guys. They were like, yes.
That's so sad that the magazines then didn't have the impact that they were supposed to have.
Yeah, initially.
Okay.
So what I came to find out is that, and I didn't see this because I was on stage, after passing out a bunch of magazines, security went around trying to confiscate people's magazines, and people were not having it. Like I heard at least two dozen stories in person, more like on social media, people commenting of where they were like running around the security guards or like wrestling it from them and storing it in their bags.
Okay.
So it was like a real grassroots effort. It's one of those, I think they call it the Barbra Streisand effect, where like you try to quell something and it makes it so much more visible. So then everyone was like, what are these magazines? They saw my social media posts, and they were like DMing me and like coming up to me outside of the venue being like, oh, we won a magazine, we got ours taken, or we kept ours. Here's the story of how we like evade the security guards. And I still have a lot of questions. Like one, I asked them who in security then made that decision. They still never got back to me. Like they said they're going to investigate. I didn't care to follow up, but like they never did. And then two, I just feel like there's something weird about the answer that it was the magazines, because I feel like if it was a magazine and it was just like the top 10 most like top tier AI systems that you could have, like they wouldn't have like it was not been the same reaction. I feel like it's hypothetical, but like we all know it. I think it's the fact that it was like gun control related, it was political, perhaps it was the branding of it, but there was something about what was in it in the content that required them to remove it. It was not just some sort of, and also there was no rules in it, so you can't pass anything out. So all of that being said, it was a very fishy circumstance, has a very happy ending. We ended up we had so much more magazines. We had boxes of them. We ended up being able to, outside of the venue in the like public sidewalk, host like a passing out session. We were planning to be there for 30 minutes just to see if anyone was interested. We sat out there for 4 hours. And for the entirety of the 4 hours, people were coming and taking magazines. We depleted like over 200 of them, and we captured on social media. So by and large, it was an effective campaign.
As an intervention, it landed.
It landed. It very much landed. And afterwards, I posted my speech. This was like even like a week later. So it was like after I thought everything had already had a happy ending and died down. And that speech was 6 minutes on Instagram. And you expect that to like do terribly because nobody watches anything for 6 minutes. It was like over 1 million views in like the first few days, like hundreds of thousands of likes and comments from celebrities, from activists, from the family, the parents. Manuel and Patricia sent me a really, really nice message. They told me that like Joaquin sent me and was like shining down. And I just like obviously was like crying so much.
I'd be bawling. Well, thank you for telling that story and clarifying just the sequence of events. And I'm sorry that happened to you. It's always, I don't know, I think as young people, you know, like when you're brought into these spaces, it's a lot. It's, you know, like it's a privilege. it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, and then I can't imagine having something like that happen to me after you've put, and I'm assuming you put a lot of energy and time into that speech.
Yeah.
But speaking of, I want to get into the speech because again, I think that was the point of it all. So you kept referencing anti-intellectualism in your speech. Can you say more about how, just the rise of anti-intellectualism in the country and its connection to gun violence?
Yeah. So the rise of anti-intellectualism is basically defined by the realization that people are doing, or I don't know how like statistically true this is, but at least the most prominent people are doing a lot less investigative work and are a lot less intellectually curious. So they're less inclined to check sources, less inclined to fact check, to cross-reference their ideas and like data, and instead are basing a lot of like policy decisions and voter decisions on solely emotion, and a lot of times solely the rhetoric of demagogues like Trump, who like have these catchy things that they say that are completely untrue. I think one big example is like when he said that Haitian immigrants are eating pets. And I mean, all the multitude of things that you might hear from the right. And in some cases, I mean, Democrats and the left and like everyone in the middle as well. But I think what social media created is an ecosystem of people who can rise to the top and be looked at as thought leaders without actually like thinking or without actually doing any research. And this is something you find across the board. When it comes to gun violence specifically, once again, gun rights advocacy is very emotionally based. And gun rights advocacy is very emotionally based. Pro gun advocacy is very emotionally based. And one of the videos that I made that actually got Jackie to reach out to me was a video that was more in line with my traditional content, but it was talking about the racialized origins of the gun culture in the United States, and how one thing that was very unique about the United States that makes it unique across any country and any of its peers is the idea that to create the United States required a certain level of deputization of the citizens, which means that your average person, when the United States was being founded, needed to have a gun in order to advance the founding of the United States. So at first, this is like the laws you see in Massachusetts, where I live right now, or Jamestown, where men were forced to, after church, do gun training in order to kill Native people and to colonize the lands. And then those same men were also forced to get guns in order to quell slave insurrections during the cotton is king economy. And then when that's over, when they're pushing west into now what is the Midwest, we have the gun-toting cowboys versus Indians, that whole thing and this whole culture in America. The KKK, even when they were originally superheroes, like people loved the KKK when they first came out. There's a movie called Birth of a Nation, which is all about the KKK. They were treated like the Avengers. And one reason why is that they were using their guns and fighting the rise of Black people after the Civil War. It goes until today where a lot of white people talk about home invasions, and it's very racialized, especially if you go into the 90s and the super predator myth. So gun control is really the counter to that, in that all of the people, especially if you look at like March for Our Lives and the young activists, of course they have emotional stories that allow you to resonate with what happened, but they also back it up with data. And Biden actually had an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which looked at the data and shows that having a gun in the home is more likely to result in lethal domestic violence than it is you protecting yourself from some home invasion, like it's like, I don't know, like Law and Order or something. So that's all to say that whereas gun rights and the pro-gun movement is very emotional, very racialized, very fear-based, gun control advocacy is very data-driven and it's very sensible. And that's the heart of what I wanted to get at with that speech.
And it also reinforces a narrative of like control and supremacy, like you're, the protector, and
it's a power fantasy. It allows people to have a power fantasy where they can dominate others around them in a way that probably will never actually come to be, but they have these like ideas in their head. They want to be that hero.
So as a and I believe you use this title, the Gen Z historian.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to combat anti-intellectualism right now?
I mean, I love the work that I do. I cannot see myself doing any other job. I was actually going to be a consultant. God, oh my God, it was a horrible time in my life. But like a management consultant. Like that's the job that I got when I interned as a sophomore. I hated it. It was horrible.
Like in the corporate space?
Like super corporate, like the most corporate one can imagine. It was a company called McKinsey and Company. So anyone who like knows what that is will understand just how like terrible that would have been for my life and the work that I do.
This is much more liberating and
absolutely. Much more ethical. Much more liberating, all of that. And I had this experience after interning and just absolutely hating my internship. And then I was student body president at Yale University. So this will come up when I talk about like the experiences that I had that made me want to get into advocacy more. But then of course it was 2020 where I think that woke so many people up. And by 2021, I was already creating videos online just for fun about history and being able to be the first person that people hear a lot of like both factual information and also arguments that are more of my opinion from. It's a big responsibility. And like, I think of myself as a thought leader and I'm called a thought leader. But when you have those ideas and then you see them widely discussed after, and you know you made that impact, it's the best feeling because you really do feel like you change the trajectory of conversations, both in the country and in the world as well.
One thing I loved in your speech, you said this idea of thoughts and prayers, you know, in our response to epidemics like gun violence, that kind of desensitizes us. And so I'm just curious, have we become a thoughts and prayers culture?
Absolutely. I think it's actually something that Joaquin's parents say a lot, that the kids, or I guess now they're adults, March for Our Lives say a lot. But thoughts and prayers really does block action, or at least it comforts people in a way that they should not be comforted. Columbine was probably the first like modern history really big like event of a school shooting. And then I think the one where thoughts and prayers was really cemented was Sandy Hook, when there was kindergartners who were killed under a Democrat president. And even then, like beyond the people who had crazy conspiracies like Alex Jones, who were just saying that it was a hoax, you had people who were responding through faith. And that's not valid, obviously. Like, I don't want to, I mean, people have their ways of coping, but it was overdone, especially in relative to the actual actions and change that would make something like that not happen.
Policy change.
Yeah. So like policy change, cultural changes, even like societal changes. When you have a situation that requires actual action, once again, actual data and research, and like we had in the last White House, not in this one, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, to look at and to execute on, because like this executive branch, so someone to execute on these policies that could stop and prevent, or at least lessen, because perhaps they'll never be zero, but like definitely lessen the amount of gun violence. It really hurts when people are just responding with comforting words for themselves as opposed to action that'll actually help the victims, both in the present and also the future, because there are future victims of gun violence. We don't know who they are.
Right.
It can be anyone. It can be you. It can be me. It can be anyone watching this. And that's the reality. That's an uncomfortable reality. And that discomfort is what drives change, not the comforts of something like thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. I mean, it is a thought every time I go into like a mall or like a movie theater. You know, I had that anxiety from when I was like 12 years old, you know, about movie theaters. And but you're right. I think to the extent I could, I've channeled that anxiety into the work that I've done,
which is great,
organizing and advocacy. But now we're seeing just as you're telling us, the various ways in which anti-intellectualism can block the action that is necessary in this moment.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to learn more, I'll just like give a quick plug, but it's 30under30.us. So 30 UNDER30.US to see the magazine. And within it are the stories and also the data and the policy action and the nonprofits that you can support to create change.
And we'll definitely include that in
Thank
show
you.
notes. So now that we've learned a little bit about you, I want to play a game.
Yeah, lighten up the mood a little bit.
Yeah, it's still going to require some thinking and some response, but let's kind of get into a little bit of a lighter space.
Yeah.
So the game I've designed for you today is called Fix This Claim. I'm going to read off a few claims that have emerged over the last couple years in various scary places on the internet.
Yeah.
And you see where this is going.
Yeah.
And you're going to fix the claim.
Okay.
All right? Okay. So first misleading claim. Enslaved people gained valuable job skills from slavery. So not all parts of slavery were negative.
So the first thing the main thing I want to dispel is the idea that enslaved people gain skills from slavery. One of the reasons that West Africans were targeted specifically for the slave trade was the skills that they already had. So they were great herders. They had crops and rice, and they were farmers. They also had empires, and they were agricultural workers. So they were coming in with so much advanced knowledge. One of the ones that is one of the most inspiring stories that I've heard is a man named Onesimus. He was enslaved in Boston. And whereas in Boston, a lot of the people there were dying of rampant smallpox infections, Onesimus actually was the person who brought the idea of inoculation, which led into the vaccines we have today, to the people of Boston and helped prevent the deaths there. So enslaved people came with so much knowledge, and they came with agricultural skills. And what enslavement did is actually confine them to roles where they weren't able to express themselves, and they weren't able to thrive in life and execute on all the skills that they had. It actually diminished their ability to be humans and to live life to their fullest. So they did not gain things from slavery. They brought things that were then utilized and that were exploited by the slave traders.
You fixed the claim.
Thank you. Try.
All right, next one. Misleading claim number 2. Schools are teaching critical race theory to kids to make them feel guilty and hate America.
So there's two.
The eye roll.
Yeah, there's two things there. One, that they're being taught critical race theory, and two, that if they were or whatever they are being taught makes them hate America. I think the first one is that I'll deal with is the hate America. When you learn more about racism in the United States and the issues of white supremacy, within that and within those lessons, there's almost always, if not always, someone who fought against it, right? And that person can be of any race. So when you think about slavery, there's so many abolitionists who were white, or the Quakers, whatever the case may be. Like, they was led, of course, by Black Americans and the enslaved people themselves at the center. But they had allies across the board. When you look at the instances of like immigrant rights and labor rights, and I'm sure indigenous sovereignty as well, like it's a lot of coalition building. So if you learn about racism in the United States and you feel bad, then you're empathizing more with racist people than you are with the people who fought against racism. Because you don't have to be Black to fight against anti-Blackness. And if you're a white person, you can look towards and take inspiration from all the white people who also fought against anti-Blackness. So I think what people are saying there is that when they look at history, they side with and they feel more empathy for the problematic people than the people who were oppressed, which I think is weird. I think it's very weird, because it's not everyone against white people, it's everyone against racist people. That's how history should be taught. Critical race theory is also just not, at least in public schools, public school curriculums, it's just not being taught to students K through 12. It's a high level concept that was developed not even in undergrad. It's developed in graduate schools, which is like, I didn't even go to graduate school. So
Dropping the facts.
Yeah, and I think that's important to say. It's a graduate school level ideology that looks at legal frameworks and the law, and looks at how, when laws are being created, And you can see this in a lot of the documents written as laws are being created, that they were created with white people in mind and everyone else not in mind, or at least the subjugation of people perhaps in mind, but like not their well-being if you were non-white. And there's so much, even within that, there's so much that bolsters that, both historically speaking and like within the legal analysis. So I'm not just saying that kids are not being taught critical race theory, but I also want to make clear that critical race theory is not something to hate or be afraid of. It's a very valid educational system with a lot of scholarship to back it up.
I did not expect to learn so much in this game, but I think that was the point. I'm like, okay, this is working.
Yeah.
So, okay, the third and final misleading claim. Immigration today is a deliberate plot to replace white Americans. It's historical fact.
I actually really like this one. I'm reading a book called White Pedestal: How Ancient Greece and Rome are used to like bolster white supremacist ideas. And one thing in that book actually talks about the Great Replacement theory and its history. And it was actually created by like a French intellectual back in like the 1900s. It's an idea that was created within larger waves of like immigration from Africa, of course, based off of racism and white supremacists. Like in that same book that he calls the Great Replacement theory in French, he talks about like how there's the primacy of the white race and how white people need to preserve their race. And what you have is that idea being transferred to America later on, in what is known as the Great Replacement theory, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, kind of what you just described, the idea that immigrants are brought in to worsen the country, to affect and to lower the amount of white people. And these are very anti-intellectual ideas. They're based off of racist stereotypes, conspiracies that involve many different groups. Like oftentimes you'll see that people say that Jewish people are the ones who are coordinating it at the top, and then Black and Latinos are being used and brought in, and they're just having babies. It's very scary and creepy. And we know it's not true because, well, number one, I mean, immigration has always occurred in America. And we've seen this sort of rhetoric always, when it was the Irish immigrants, when it was the Italian immigrants, when it was the German immigrants. So it's nothing new. It's a hysteria and it's scapegoating. And it's what people do when figures like Donald Trump or figures like J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller, who are in large ways very much white supremacists, get into office and need a way to get votes. So they steer people's negative energy at these minority groups so that they can get votes. It's not based on data, and it's not based on research, and it's not based on anything factual.
Call it like it is. I think you just won the game.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I maybe went too deep sometimes, but I love talking about these types of things.
So great. Like I said, I learned some new facts in there as well. How do you game over? You won. How do you not become so jaded with all this fucking nonsense everywhere and all these conspiracies and just the derogation of truth?
It's hard. I mean, I do like, it's a kind of, I can become jaded. I wouldn't say it's a permanent state that I'm in.
Well, this is a safe space.
Jaded podcast, jaded. Right? It's a place to be jaded. There are definitely moments. I think if I had to answer it directly, one, there's hope, because when you look at history, especially Black and Native history in this country, just candidly, like it was almost always so much worse, and in some cases like so much infinitely worse that like it's laughable almost, like compare our situation to like anything before. And if they could survive, we can, sort of situation. It doesn't mean that our problems aren't valid, but it's like you have examples to look towards when people literally thought all hope was lost and they still somehow persevered. That's one thing that helps, looking at history for motivation. And then the second thing is like doing the work that I do. So in as much as it makes me feel bad and sad and like dejected, seeing how many issues are existing in the world and seeing how like there's a reversion to the racism that we may have thought went away with the Obama and Black Lives Matter era, I almost take an intellectual curiosity in understanding how and why it's happening. And the more books you read and the more like, I mean, perhaps TikToks of mine that you consume, you start to understand it. And I think when you understand it, you feel like you have the ability to combat it. And that understanding and that desire to understand, that seeking to learn is very empowering, because you realize, okay, he's saying that immigrants are trying to replace people. The same thing was said all throughout like American history. This is why it's coming back. This is how we can combat it. Like, I think it gives you a strategy and a blueprint for overcoming the situation. It might take time and it might take a lot of effort, but I think it is very empowering to like seek out knowledge. And then in my case, then disseminate that knowledge to more people.
Yeah, let's talk about your approach. You create amazing content.
Thank you.
To educate people, both on TikTok, Instagram, on various platforms. Why did you choose that approach and that form to educate people?
So I grew up on YouTube in the Black Lives Matter era. It's a very specific thing to say, but like if you did the same, you would know, like, and I'll explain what I mean by that.
I'm curious.
It was the rise of, honestly, people like Ben Shapiro and who was like a precursor to Charlie Kirk, you can think of him as. So he was like one of the original people to go around and do debates. And actually debates, heavy quotations.
Double, quadruple.
Like let's do it at the same time, like from you to me. And at that time, there was a lot of racism on the internet. So this was the time of something called Didn't Do Nothing, which is a meme, a very racist meme where people were making fun of the Black mothers of victims of police violence who said that like their sons didn't do anything, with like a fake African-American English accent saying, oh, he didn't do nothing. He didn't do nothing. And it was like a horrible time to be alive. There was the trend after Trayvon Martin died of something called Trayvoning, where white teenagers would lay face down with a bag of Skittles, the way in which they found Trayvon Martin's dead body after he was killed by George Zimmerman in 2012. So it was traumatizing and terrible. That's like, one hand you have the memes, and the second hand you have people like Ben Shapiro who would go and do these college sort of tours and debate people saying that racism doesn't exist, that Black Lives Matter is a scam, that Black people make up 13% of the population, 50% of violent crime. So they're the real issue. Black culture is the issue. Police violence is not a real thing, like that should be combated. And in a lot of ways, he would get so much support and he would go viral on like both YouTube and places like 4chan and Twitter, because the people sitting across from him, who were oftentimes like activists or whatever, they could not adequately respond to his points in a way that was understood by the audience. So I remember there was one clip where he said that like the statistics about violent crime, and the other panelists just started laughing and they just called him racist and said that he was like a white supremacist, which are things that might be true.
Yeah. So I just, an anecdote, I dumped someone because they started following Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
And it's because, like, to your point, this man, of course, just, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He followed, like you're saying, the information, the quote unquote facts
over
that,
feelings.
Yes, that Ben Shapiro touts and disseminates. It's easy for people to believe and consume as like you're saying, a fact. But if you're getting pulled into the space of anti-intellectualism, you're not necessarily going further and then fact checking those quote unquote facts. Anyways, it just became so annoying arguing with him that I was like, this is over. We're done here.
It's super exhausting. And like, to be fair, like he has history on his side, because what we're brought up with thinking lends itself easier towards conservative ideas, is my take. So like, for example, like when I grew up, it's like you're not taught much about Native American history. I was in Maryland, which is the East Coast. So there's not a large presence of Native American like in people. So like, as far as I knew, like they were like, if I left up to my teachers, I would not think the population of Native Americans was like over maybe like a few thousand people, like from the ages of like 0 to like 10. So like when someone goes,
when it's actually the Native population is the same size like, more or less as the Jewish community, actually.
Exactly. And these are things that like when someone like Ann Coulter or whoever says like, oh, the natives are all savages, or J.D. Vance said that they were just like committing child sacrifices. Like these are things that if you're just simply going through the American life, you can easily believe. So like when Ben Shapiro says racist things, it's easy to believe. He lies with statistics, it's easy to believe. I'm gonna like jump to what I realized is that like we needed people, and this was always something I had internally. I never really executed on it until recently, but I always realized that we needed people who could make these ideas and stories just as digestible and change the sort of baseline understanding of American history that the average person has. So then when people are making policy arguments or they're doing activism, they have a foundational set of knowledge that will make them question when they hear something racist and also make them support something that they hear is anti-racist. So you start to see this now a lot. I think there's a lot of people who shared my trauma. Like you have a lot of sort of quote unquote left debate bros or just like racial justice educators who are trying to make things simple. But I found that whatever it is the right did, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Michael Knowles, Candace Owens, Steven Crowder, all these people, they were very early on in making their ideas accessible and digestible through social media. And I mean, obviously I disagreed and hated everything that they were saying, but the only way to combat it effectively was to not do what people did in the past where they were just laughing and calling them white supremacists and racist, which not saying that they aren't, but to explain it in a way that perhaps the average American or even like someone who agrees with you but can't articulate it, something that they understand. And if I had to say the main praise that I get, which I feel the most grateful for when someone says this on a video, is when people say, I've always felt the same way, I've always thought the same thing, but I just did not know how to say it. And you gave me the words to explain it. Like that's my goal, to make these things logical and simple and make these stories accessible so that if someone comes at you and says, oh, America wasn't stolen, or, oh, like black people sold other black people into slavery. Slavery in America was not that bad. Every society had slavery, that you can respond in a way that's understandable.
And you're in a time where we need just way more critical thinkers out there in the world. I think your work helps and inspires that.
Thank you. Thank you. I try. And you too. I want to give you praise. You talked about some of the work that you were doing in the campaign, and I mean the project that you're doing now and trying to elevate voices and stories. Like it's very necessary as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I try. I think if I ever do a TikTok like explanation video, I feel like I need like a 3-day rest afterwards because I'm like, that was hard.
Yeah. And then you look at the comments and you need another week off.
Yes, exactly. You've mentioned a few times Native history. What was your journey in learning about Native American history? Was there a process in like realizing, oh, I wasn't told the truth?
Oh yeah. And I would say like I won't say ashamed, but like it's like sad and regrettable that like it happened later on in life. So I think growing up,
I think it's important to name that though, because I think a lot of people in this country and world are in the same position as you.
Absolutely. And before I get into that story, I'll say that one thing that informs the sort of videos that I make is me looking back and seeing like, what did I not know, or what stereotypes or like premises that I have that I wish were dispelled so much early on in my life, specifically about Native history and other histories as well. When it comes to Native history, I mean, like the early touch points were like the things that American kids go through. So like Peter Pan, Pocahontas was probably the most prominent one, Disney's Pocahontas. And then the reason I actually really love history, at least one of the early ones, is because I was a huge Indiana Jones fan. Like and I rewatch the movies every once in a while. And I've critiqued them since, but like one of the opening scenes, if not the opening scene in the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's stealing that golden idol from somewhere in South America. And then like it's the trope of like the angry indigenous people like chasing him with blow darts and spears. So it was horrible from media. And then it was doubly horrible because I'm from Maryland. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Maryland football team used to just be a slur with a stereotypical head of a Native person. And that was always a debate. I want to say around like maybe middle school is when I first started realizing it was a debate because people called it offensive, but it was still nothing that there was like widespread, oh, like we need to change this. It wasn't 2020. It was like 2011. People were less woke back then. I want to say the first time that I ever got like an intervention to that was actually a form of media, and it wasn't Native media. It was something called Malcolm in the Middle, a sitcom from like the 90s and 2000s. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I have to tell you, Malcolm in the Middle. There was one episode I think where like one of the
Frankie
brothers,
Muniz?
Frankie Muniz is the main character, there was one episode where one of the brothers like discovers a totem pole and he like thinks it's talking to him and he's trying to like understand how to worship it and interpret it. And then there's like a native actor who comes and he's like a character as well. And he just like makes fun of him. He's like, you white men are all the same. You think we're like singing to birds and like worshiping bears. And this totem pole was just like something that he got for his kids. Like it was like a funny intervention on like those stereotypes and just like an average American sitcom.
I missed this episode.
Yeah, it's a great one. I would definitely recommend
I'm gonna go look back.
I watched the YouTube clip before this just to refresh my memory.
Oh,
but I think that was like the first intervention I had. And then I think over time, I mean, my parents were always very interested in Black history, and that was something that always came up. But I don't think I ever got like a full comprehensive education on like Native history until college. Because also I have to so I'm from Germantown, Maryland, which has been ranked the most diverse place in America. But even then, there's like not any visibility for Native Americans. And we don't learn.
We're not often included in those polls.
Yeah, and probably not even including the polls and the data. So it's just like, and I think also being in, I think something specific about, I don't know what it is, but I feel like specifically Maryland and DC, like there's a like general lack of Native history. Cause I feel like there's some kids I know in like the Midwest or like specifically the Southwest, I'm sure, where there's still some sort of education on Native American history, like even if it's lackluster, but in just Maryland, DC, you just don't get that.
Yeah. Until DC got the NMAI, the Smithsonian Native American Museum. Anyways,
I'm not even sure which year that was, but like that's once again something that we never visited. It was just very lackluster and disappointing. When I got to college though at Yale University, they have something called cultural centers. So they have a Black cultural center, Asian American cultural center, Latino American cultural center, and a Native American cultural center. And that was a hub for a lot of like Native advocacy from like Native students specifically. So like people who were, Yale's a very progressive school. So a lot of students who go there were involved in activism. So one of my good friends from college, and this is not just because of the cultural center, but we just lived in the same dormitory building, is, you know, Kinsale?
Oh yeah, of course.
So Kinsale,
she was Drake, who's
a poet, activist, writer, teacher now. I think she's in Nashville teaching. So she was someone that I met through student government and living in the same dormitory. And I learned a lot from her. Like she used to always perform her poetry and like just in conversations. Like Yale kids are always talking about like, at the time we're like very woke in some ways, not in the classist ways, but definitely in the racial justice ways. And it was just a conversation that always came up. And then when I was in student government, by the time I was a sophomore, I was elected student body president. So within that, you kind of have to like meet with like so many students and get more involved and like be aware of the activism. So I used to go to the NACC a lot. There was an organization called ANA at the time, the Association for Native Americans at Yale, with like, I think one of the students now who I used to work with is like even like in working for a congressperson. So there was just a lot of interaction with Native students. And I think that opened up my mind and allowed me to learn so much just like from people my age in regular conversation, which was like shows cases the importance of community building and solidarity and visibility. And one of my very close friends, Evan, he's Afro-Native. So he was someone that really opened my eyes to all of the connections between Black and Indigenous people. He's not a social media person at all, but he did a YouTube video that was like an hour about like the complete history of Afro-Native solidarity, both like from enslaved people marooning into Native communities and Native people who were reclassified as Black or white just to like fit racial standards and like had quote unquote the paper genocide, and then going up until like people whose Native history was erased. So like Frederick Douglass and Crispus Attucks, who were Afro-Natives. And yeah, I think all those experiences really just opened my eyes. And by that point, like I was intellectually curious enough that when I started creating TikToks, when I majored in history, like I just started to just do some more self-taught research. And one of my early videos even kind of goes in that pattern. I was making a video about the Salem witch trials. And I was going to talk about how the first witch accused was a Black woman named Tituba, who was an enslaved woman. And then I did the research and it was like, she wasn't Black. Like she was fictionalized to be Black because they wanted to make her a voodoo priestess for the play, but she was a Native person. And I was like, oh, a Native person enslaved? And then like a Native person enslaved in Massachusetts, where the North, like in theory, didn't have slavery. And like you just open up. It's such a like a world full of interesting history and stories that need to be told. And when you match that with like the contemporary sort of activism and stories and just people that you meet, I think I definitely am someone who like is very grateful for like growing up and like having the experiences that I did, because I feel like if I were quote unquote the average American and did not have those experiences and did not access the sort of content that I put out, I would just be imbued with so many stereotypes that are just like completely untrue.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I appreciate you doing all the content you do on Native American history, because that visibility and invisibility is still so prominent in 2025. And I love hearing that back in the day there was like a funny, semi-accurate representation of Native people. And
Malcolm in the Middle. Yeah, shout out. I guess shout out to them, I think.
But they're like, even today, there's examples in popular media where it's just they get it wrong.
Yeah.
And why we're so happy we're seeing finally shows written and directed by Native people in the media.
Yeah. I think I would say also the topic of getting it wrong. I mean, because I think, as I probably made clear, but like I'm not Native, so like talking about these histories is something that can be very, I think you have to use a lot of sensitivity.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's something that I'm always trying to get better on, because there was even like when it comes to something like the Washington football team name and like mascots, I made a video about mascots and like the tomahawk chop, which is something that a lot of teams do.
Yep.
And then sometimes you might even have people who anonymously claim that they're Native. So like who knows if it's a bot or not, and saying, oh, I'm not offended, and like this doesn't offend me, and you're speaking over me. So like, that's always something to contend with. But I think like at the end of the day, it's like all, at least from what I understand, like all about trying to accept feedback where it's given, and do your best to be factual and honest. And there was one video I made about the history of Two-Spirit people, and there was a creator named Danae Aesthetics, who's a really great creator.
I love them.
Yeah,
they're so great.
Yeah, and they, I think, it was either a comment, maybe a DM, and they like said, okay, this was really good, but like you need to censor this word, and like you homogenize these communities when like they're actually pretty diverse, and you like acknowledge that. So like it's always, I want to shout out to those people too, because some people can run away from comments and feedback, but I think you only get better when you accept the feedback, accept the comments, and like try to do better moving forward.
Oh yeah. Well, this is a part of, combating it together and working collectively. And speaking on that, and you've mentioned a little bit as well, when it comes to Black-Indigenous solidarity, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think we're doing good, and also maybe some thoughts on like the work we have to keep doing.
Yeah. So I guess I want to preface this by saying I recently joined an organization called Black Liberation Indigenous Sovereignty, which is a coalition that's being built by a few activists. Like I'll try to like list some names that you might know, but like Chelsea Hicks, Rebecca Nagel's in it. There's a few prominent actors and activists who are both Black and Native.
Cool.
It's just a low stakes community of just like people sharing knowledge and sharing insights, and of course having hard conversations, because speaking for myself as someone who does history, I think the two tense topics that always come up are like, one, the Native nations that owned enslaved Black people, and then perhaps like in recent times the story of the Buffalo Soldiers, so the Black soldiers who carried out massacres of Indigenous people. And I think when like those histories come up, it can be a hard time, and you have to like reconcile. You also have to, of course, dispel myths, because someone who's Indigenous to like the Southwest, like a Pueblo person, had nothing to do with like the Cherokee enslaving Black people.
Right,
so like that's just like its own factual error. There's good and bad, obviously. Like there are stories that we have to condemn, we have to contend with, but I think there's so much solidarity and so much impact that we can make from having solidarity that's what we try to highlight.
Love it. Well, let's move on to a new game.
Yes,
another game.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. What I'm going to do is just kind of lay out a few cards like this. You're going to choose at random.
Yeah. Is it a magic trick or?
No, unfortunately. The magic is in your response.
Okay.
And so on the back of them are questions, kind of introspective, a little on the deeper side. But I'll just lay out a few, or I'll just like spread them like this, and you choose at random and then just respond.
Of course.
Okay. So, okay, just pull it out and leave it there.
Okay.
And all.
Do I look? Oh, you.
Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you. Okay. If jadedness is armor, what exactly were you trying to protect when you put it on? Or what are you trying to protect when you put it on?
Yeah, if jadedness is armor, I think fear and pessimism, because especially for me, so my main work is making stories about the history of injustice in America, quote unquote, history can't hide, hidden history. And those micro stories of like massacres and enslavement and whatever, like are horrible. But what makes you feel really pessimistic to this day is when you look at structural violence and something like critical race theory and how a lot of these racist laws were built into the economy and built into the legal system and built in such a way that like you don't actively have to carry out violence in order to be consistently oppressing communities. So like someone like myself, I told you I was filming a documentary about Harlem like a few days ago. And part of that was sharing my family history. And like, luckily, like my immediate family, they kind of quote unquote got out. And like I was raised very comfortably. But like one of my aunts, she lives in the same housing projects in Spanish Harlem that she grew up in. And like lifetime of poverty, lifetime of like really traumatic events that have happened to her that you can trace back to big things in society, whether it be like her dad going crazy after, and her uncles going crazy after like the Vietnam War and after being conscripted, the crack and heroin epidemics, which were flooding the communities, over policing, gun violence. And it doesn't seem like there's a solution to like something like that, like the inner city. I don't want to speak to this, but like I'm sure it can feel similarly, perhaps like on some of the issues that exist in reservations or some of the issues that exist in like even like quote unquote global South, like just countries that have just been so disenfranchised. And I think if I put on the armor of being jaded, I can look at the history and analyze it without feeling like there's no hope and no solution. And I do that when I can't find optimism, but I don't want to go into pessimism. I become jaded.
Thank you for sharing that story. We're going to do a couple more. So just pull it out and leave it, and then I'll read it to you. Pull it out. Yeah, great. Sounds good. Efficient. I like it. Okay, there we go. Okay, what's a ritual or routine that keeps you grounded?
I would say getting 10,000 steps a day. And it started off like a weird, like, oh, I saw it on TikTok, like the fitness thing.
Yeah.
But the 10,000 steps, no matter the weather, no matter anything, like are the best thing for me. And I also importantly do it usually without listening to anything. So like no music, no podcasts. Like, I mean, this podcast now, but usually no podcasts. And just try to just think, like think through things. If there's something that's like stressing me, like it's usually, I feel like you're usually stressed when there's a problem that you don't have a clear solution for because you haven't sat down to really like think it through because like life is just coming at you. But if you like walk, and 10,000 steps is equivalent to like 5 miles, it's about like 2 hours of walking. But if you like somehow spread it out throughout the day or just do one long walk, you're able to think through things. And like some of my best ideas and my best solutions for things that I'm going through, whether it's an argument with someone or like a life problem or a work problem, just come from walking. And I'm lucky to live in Boston, which is like an incredibly walkable city. And it's beautiful to walk anywhere.
We love a walkable city.
I love a walkable city. But like wherever you can, if you can, like getting those steps in is just like so cathartic.
I can relate. I recently, people are going to hear a lot about my dog on this podcast.
Of course, we love that.
Once also I live in a place where hiking is very accessible. So I did it a lot, but it would always be like kind of like a chore. Like, okay, fine, I'm going to go hike. But now I do it so joyfully and yeah, like you said, without listening to something or like scrolling while I'm walking, which is just dangerous. But
Yeah,
for me, I'm like hand-eye coordination. I need to focus. So walking just with my little doggy, no, scrolling, no podcast, no music. I find that to be really
absolutely.
centering, and it helps me process. So I definitely resonate with that.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you one more question
Mhm.
that we ask each guest, and that is, how do you move through jadedness? What keeps you moving through, disillusionment?
One thing that keeps me going, and this will be very specific because it's something I discovered this year, reconnecting with old friends and
Hmm.
fostering relationships. So I had a friend who I had a huge falling out with in high school. It was like my best friend, and I hadn't talked to him in like 10 years. And on a whim this year, I just decided to reach out, and we had gotten a meal, like a dinner, and then we went out for drinks, and it like lasted like it was supposed to be like for 2 hours, lasted like 6, 7 hours.
Hmm.
And it was just such a heartwarming feeling. Like they had grown so much. Like I had grown so much. We talked about the reasons we had a falling out and like just made plans for like hanging out in the future.
Was there
And
like forgiveness involved?
yeah, and like they did
Oh,
something like that was pretty bad and like they
I'm like,
apologized
spill
for
the
it.
tea.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, but that's all to say. I think the most important thing is just like realizing that it's the people that you already know. And like I'm a big fan of new friends somewhat, but I'm a big advocate for
I
old
saw a little
friends.
eye roll there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I've had experiences where it's good you're bringing this out. Yeah, maybe I lied. I had experiences, especially later on in life, especially being an influencer, where you can meet new people and like the relationship doesn't end out the best. It's just like people can be people.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm actually much more of an advocate for like fostering those old friendships and those people who know you and who knew you. And I think maybe it does come from the lifestyle that I live. Like I'm always meeting new people. Like I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful that I get to travel so
Mm,
much. I'm grateful that I get to do so many things. But within that, I think the value of like reconnecting with people that you've known your entire life. Like yesterday, I got
yeah.
dinner with another friend that I had known since high school. And those are like the moments where you kind of like see life like for what it is, like the philosophy of life, like someone that you knew when they were baby face. And like now the reason I got a dinner with my friend yesterday is because he recently got engaged. And he's like the first
Mm,
friend in like our
congrats to
friend
your
group.
friend.
Yeah, congrats. Congrats. Congrats to USK.
Cheers.
Yeah, for a drink if I had champagne instead of green tea. I was
You could
offered.
have.
I was offered alcohol this morning, but I chose not to. But yeah, like just seeing life and like seeing people grow up and seeing people change and seeing people like reliving those memories. I think that's the
Mhm.
thing for me. Like, and I started off actually like to what I was saying. I started off this conversation so excited because I'm going to my college town and like visiting
Hmm.
some college friends tomorrow and the next day. And I think like just that being with people that you've known and like watching them grow up and growing up alongside them, like that's the thing that like always makes me feel better.
I love that you said that. I'm very much a fan of that, and all my best friends right now are like still when I'm 30, in
Mhm.
my mid 30s, are my best friends from high
That's
school.
great. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, no new friends.
No new friends. No new friends.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so amazing to have you on the show, Khalil.
Yeah. Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah, just thank you so much. I hope you have a great time visiting your college buddies.
Yeah. Thank you so much.